What was the resolution for the St. Louis Cardinals?
My resolution for them, which I guess is easier said than done, is to keep the rotation healthy in 2023. That's because, as everybody knows who's listening to this, there are some serious question marks in that rotation in terms of health and, of course, age with Wainwright, and they have done nothing to address, that lack of depth so far this offseason. It's getting pretty late out there.
Yeah, and we probably wouldn't have so much anxiety, but of course, they've been in this position, well, at least definitely 2 years in a row, but it seems to me it's even gone back longer than that. They proclaim that they're fine. Oh, we like our pitching. Oh, we've got these guys on the way. We have a lot of starters, and then they're scrambling like crazy, like towards the end of July to try to patch it all up again. Do you? I don't understand that in a way. Not that they have to overreact and do an overkill thing with this, but what is it that? Why do you think that they're so averse to really reinforcing their depth before the season starts?
I'm not sure. I don't know if there's some kind of organizational philosophy that they're not going to swim in like the DeGrom waters, what have you. And then once you step down from that elite tier, maybe they just like what they have internally, as opposed to guys like I don't know, Eovaldi and so forth. So I don't have a good answer for that. But I mean, when you've got guys like Matz and Flaherty and even Miklasz to an extent before last season he was really a workhorse. On top of Wainwright, who God bless him, but he could decline at any moment at that age, and that's just there are strength in numbers there to an extent, but there's not a lot of known quantities in that rotation, particularly by the standards of a team that presumably has designs on the World Series.
Do you have any? Do you have any sense? It's really an unfair question, so I'll just say that up front because nobody really knows, but we have ideas or we have opinions that begin to form over time. Do you have any good feelings about any of their young pitchers maybe emerging as somebody they can count on in 23 if they need a starter or two before they go to the trade route? Do you have a good sense of one or two of those guys, if not more?
I really like what Graceffo, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name, how he's done, particularly last season, taking that big step forward. I think he could potentially be a useful guy. Long term, I'd love Hintz. I'm not sure he's a 2023 guy, but I really like what he's done. So I think there's something there. I mean, I'm certainly not ready to completely rule out Liberatore, but I don't know. I think you need that when you're in the position the Cardinals are in, and it's kind of a win now type situation. I think you need that known quantity at bedrock and to stabilize things. And holes are going to come no matter what your rotation looks like, and you can plug those as they come up with some of these young guys. But I think you do need a bit more certainty in that rotation heading into 2023.
No, I totally agree. But just to also play along in the game that I just opened by asking you that question, I won't. I'll choose a different guy just for conversation. But I do like him. Zach Thompson looks like he's got a chance to be a really good pitcher. I don't know if they're going to need him in the bullpen next year. He was really good in the bullpen for them last season. There's a poise about him. He looks like a veteran. I mean, he doesn't scare. That's pretty obvious. So. He may be a guy that could be a pleasant surprise as well, and I would prefer, like you said, that they would have more options along the sure things line. But what are you going to do? They are who they are.
Right.
The more I look at their Dayn Perry from CBSSports.com is with us, and I'll try to shorten these questions. The more I look at the Cardinals' offense and the lineup and what they did last year and what's coming back. That offense was a lot better maybe than I thought in real time. When you step back after a couple months and you review everything, it's pretty damn good actually. And there's a lot of talent there. I'm not saying they don't need another bat, but it's almost like this has become a bat first team as opposed to pitching, which is kind of weird for those of us who have followed this team for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the offense. I love the Contreras signing that, directly addresses what was their biggest weakness last season, which was production from the catcher position, and addresses it in a strong way. Love that addition. Very targeted, and I think that is, I would love their offseason if they had a little more rotation help right now. So
Right,
how
I'm
much
with
I love the Contreras signing. I agree with you. I'm not too worried about the offense. I'm really eager to see what Nootbaar does. You made those kind of, I think, mid-season adjustments, and they really paid off. And I think there's some sustainability there. The Gorman, I think he's got a lot of potential, and maybe he emerges as the primary DH, that kind of thing. So, I'm not, and of course, Goldschmidt and Arenado, we all know that. And, what can Tyler O'Neill do if he can find some health? I'm not too worried about the offense. It's a fun lineup to watch, and I don't think that's a real concern.
Yeah, I give Carlson benefit of the doubt because he really was hurt last season. I mean, and you look at his May, June, and July, like a 3-month period, his numbers were fantastic, and then he just fell off a cliff. I mean, when you're trying to hit a ball hard and you have a wrist injury, and then on top of that, a sprained thumb, I mean, you're going to stink. You're going to look weak. So.
Yeah.
I think the guy deserves that benefit of the doubt because this is not spin. Those injuries were legit, and I really like what and I'm sure you know about it. Of course, I really like what O'Neill's doing this winter. He's concentrating everything on flexibility, and and it's overdue, but at least he's doing it, and I would think that would help him.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, he's got those elite tools and sprint speed and how hard he hits the ball and that sort of thing. It's just health for him and to an extent making contact. But if he can stay healthy, he's proved it in 2021 what he's capable of. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's a real guy there. And I share your enthusiasm for Carlson, particularly. Even if the bat doesn't become what we think it should be, he can go and get it in center field, and he's a valuable player.
Dayn Perry with us from CBSSports.com. I want to ask you this because one question I get all the time is, okay, Contreras, good signing. Yeah, he's going to provide offense. They haven't had a catcher for a while. It's going to be good. But they also have to replace Pujols. So it's nice to get Contreras, but they still have to replace Pujols. And I get that linear line of thought. I do. And he had 18 home runs and slugged over 700 in the second half of the year. But right. I think they have enough to cover for it. I'm not going to say they're going to get a 700 slugging percentage out of the DH spot, but I think the DH spot, they got a committee of pretty promising young hitters that I think is going to be able to cover that in a more than respectable way. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think a strict platoon arrangement, throwing multiple guys at the problem, I think is a very sensible approach. And, also consider the kind of season Pujols had. Is who's going to get to replace that, I mean, that was
right.
Elite production, top of the scale. There just aren't guys out there like that that the Cardinals, I mean, they're going to, sign, the top of the scale free agents to fill DH. They're just not going to do that. That's just not realistic from their standpoint. So I think it's sensible, pairing guys like Gorman and, with the right-handed bat, plenty of those and, that sort of thing. I think it's a sensible approach there. And I think, you're not going to get Pujols level of production, but, looking at the totality of it, you can bank on, given health, much better production from the catcher position, as we've noted. So, you give back some ground in some spots, you gain it in others, and you end up with a good situation and a good offense.
Dayn Perry with us, our friend from CBSSports.com. Earlier this week, because I've not talked much about the Carlos Correa situation, which is really kind of stupid on my part. It's a great topic, and it's an interesting story. So earlier this week, in fact, I think it was like the 27th, Dayn Perry and Matt Snyder teamed up on a piece on CBSSports.com about this unusual situation. And, once again, just take it away. This has been one of the more certainly intriguing stories in Major League Baseball for a long time in terms of an individual player and a contract and a physical and all that stuff. Two teams finding issues. Just your general thoughts on all of it, and how do you think this will end?
My gut feeling, and then some of the reporting on it is that I think the Mets and Correa get something done. I mean, I think Cohen is that aggressive, and by all accounts, Correa is very excited about the possibility of playing with the Mets. So I think that gets done, maybe under some slightly altered parameters in that contract. I mean, Boris is not really a guy to renegotiate based on physicals, but maybe there's a little give and take there. I'm just the thing that I can't get away from this story is just the utter embarrassment of the Giants having a presser scheduled and Correa in town, and then this happens. And that's just, we've seen deals fall apart and get complicated by the results of a physical, particularly when you're talking about, lengthy commitments. But just to be on the precipice like that and have it completely fall apart was nothing I can remember seeing in those exact circumstances. So that's something I'm not going to soon forget, is how that went down with the Giants.
Yeah, that's right. No doubt about it. Dayn, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but before you go, it's been a great winter as far as just action, signings, trades, you name it. A lot of money being thrown around. I'm not going to put a hard number on it for you, but what are 2 or 3 moves that you like the most that have been made so far? And doesn't mean you're saying that this team will win the World Series because of it. I'm just your work as an analyst and as a fan of the game. Which moves really kind of you said, yeah, I really like that. They did great there.
I thought the Diamondbacks got a really good return for Dalton Varsho in that deal with Toronto, catcher of the future, and a really good right-handed outfield bat. Varsho makes a lot of sense for the Blue Jays. I don't think it's a one-sided deal by any means, but I just really like what Arizona is putting together in terms of young talent coming together at a similar time frame. And I also like what there's a lot of risk involved, but I like what the Rangers did with their rotation. They had major weakness in that spot, and they addressed it with some definite upside guys. Again, there's some collapse risk there, but I really like the multiple arms they threw at the problem, and I think they gave themselves a real chance to make the postseason.
And one more thing, what do you think of the Cubs' activity so far? They may make some more incremental moves, who knows? But what do you think of what they've done?
I don't love the Dansby Swanson signing just because I have some reservations about his bat long term. Now, that does give them a tremendous defensive middle infield for years to come. I still think they are a major addition or two away from being a real threat in the division, and this is not a particularly strong division once you get past the Cardinals. I thought it was solid. I mean, they spent some resources, which they should have done for a long time before this. But Dansby Swanson is your marquee addition when you need to make up a good bit of ground. Just doesn't really do it for me.
Dayn Perry, thanks for your generosity of time. It's really good to catch up with you and see what you're thinking about these things. I want everybody to read you, of course, at cbssports.com. And Dayn Perry's Twitter tag is at Dayn Perry, which is Dayn Perry, at Dayn Perry. And again, Happy New Year to you. We'll talk to you down the road. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bernie. Always fun to talk to you.
All right, that's our friend. I think the world of Dayn Perry have for a long, long time. He's a level-headed guy. And I know you all probably were spitting out your coffee or whatever, when he and I are talking about, oh, yeah, I would think the offense is going to be really good. I do. I can explain why if you want when we come back. We've still got time to talk about some other things, but I'm kind of in the mood to maybe talk about that because I think it's helpful. The Cardinals end the season with a terrible performance offensively against the Phillies in 2 games. Just terrible. Now, that sort of just like puts everyone in a state, emotional state, an angry state, where it kind of erases, not literally, but it kind of erases all the good things they did over 162 games. And, yeah, I know it's all about winning championships. They got work to do. I get it. But I also know by the fact that they didn't build a good enough team to get themselves into a longer series, and it is such an emergency series when you're playing best of 3. It's an emergency situation. You have one misstep, you get struck by thunder or lightning. You get your thunderstruck, your lightning struck, whatever you want to say, the way they were at the end of game one, and it's really, really, really hard to recover from. And I understand that because I've seen it a million times. So I'm not saying we should give them a free pass for what happened against the Phillies, but what I am saying is that it doesn't mean you just, in effect, take all the stats away and just completely trash everything they did for 162 games, because they had a really good offense. And if anything, I think, the Pujols thing will be a challenge, but they have enough people to cover the DH spot and do well. And the upgraded catcher offensively is pretty huge compared to how bad it was for the Cardinals the last couple years. I think they're going to have a really good offense. And Dayn is right, and I happen to agree with him. The concern is going to be the starting pitching and the pitching in general. And so when we return here, I'm gonna put some things on the table to think about. The Cardinals have sort of changed their identity as a team, and that's what I mean. Where once you step away from the shock, kind of the anger of how their season ended, because it was more of the same in the postseason. They've lost 9 out of their last 10. There is that period where you're just disgusted by the whole thing. But what I do is then I just, I get that out of my system, and then I'm like, all right, you know what? I want to re-examine things. I want to see, I just want to get a healthier perspective about what they did during the regular season, because there was so much, just these constant attacks on Jeff Albert. The worst hitting coach in the history of mankind. There has never been a worse hitting coach in Western civilization. It just was so absurd that then you go to Baseball Reference, you go to all these other places that I visited today, and you see what they did with their offense over 162 games, and you're like, well, I thought this was the worst offense that, we had all ever seen, and because of one guy. Huh. Am I looking at the wrong numbers? No, it's the Cardinals numbers. So y'all going to have to, well, you don't have to listen to it, but some of you may not like what I'm going to tell you on the other side of the break, because listen, man, I'll never forget the Matt Holliday deniers. Shows that I was doing back in the day, and these people would battle you, metaphorically speaking, to the death, insisting that Holliday was overrated and he never got a big hit ever. And I'm like, Matthew Leach of MLB.com, he named them. He said, well, I call them the Holliday deniers. It's just like, despite every fact that completely destroys what they're saying, they, no, you can't convince them. They made up their mind. And that's all there is to it. Matt Holliday's terrible, period. He's never had a big hit, period. Facts don't matter. So there's some of that, I think, some of that was kind of floating around with the Cardinals offense during the regular season. So let's get into that. I'll refresh everyone's memory, because I refreshed my own. So I can refresh yours, because I did it on my own self.